Great, thanks, Kristen. So the League was founded in 1920 with a mission to empower voters and defend democracy, and has always had a core principle of nonpartisanship. The League of Women Voters, strictly nonpartisan. We do not support or oppose political parties or candidates for office, and we refrain from engaging in discussions of a partisan nature. Our goals are to encourage informed and active participation in government, to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. Just a couple more reminders. The primary election is coming up March 3rd. In 2022, there were only 20% of registered voters who turned out to vote in the primary. So we're really encouraging everyone to get out there. Early voting is underway already and will continue through February 28th. And Election Day is March 3rd. Use your Vote 411 candidate guide. It's live, it's terrific. I used it last week when I went to early vote. So use that to give you information on the candidates on your ballot. A few things upcoming for the League of Wake County. There's a voter registration event at Wake Tech North Campus on February 26th. A member potluck is taking place on February 28th. We have a meet and chat for League members and friends in Morrisville on March 4th. And there are always committee meetings going on. So make sure you check your calendar on the website. But remember, if you're a member, you got to log in to be able to register for member-only events. Just a preview for our March timely topic, talking about voter suppression in person at Highland United Methodist. And we've got guest speakers from Democracy NC and the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. So please register, show up, bring your lunch, and mingle with other League members and guests. I will turn it over to Kathy Ternauchik, who's one of the co-chairs for our membership committee, with a couple of announcements.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate about the brunch on February 28th. That's going to be held in the Wake Forest area. It's in one of our members' homes. And it's wonderful for new folks to come, but we welcome any of the members to join in, just to get to know people on a little more intimate level. And also just want to reiterate the meet and chat, which is on March 4th in Morrisville. Again, just an opportunity to come together in fellowship and have lunch together and meet new folks. And if you're new, we especially love to see you. And if you're existing members for years, we'd love to see you there too. One thing that is not quite on the calendar yet is the League 101 that we will be doing on Saturday, April 11th from 10 to 12 at our new office building. So please look for it on the calendar. We will be getting information. If you've joined in the past year and have not attended League 101, this is your chance, and we would love to see you there. And I think that's it for the next month or so, and we'll be announcing more things at the next timely topics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Thompson to introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Sandra. So my name is Kathy Thompson, and I'm the Civics Education Committee Chair for the League of Women Voters of Wake County. And as Sandra mentioned in her introduction, the mission of the League of Women Voters is to empower voters and defend democracy. And as she pointed out, we do this through voter education and engagement, advocating for democracy and encouraging civic participation. But key to all of that is civic education. It is what equips citizens, individuals with the knowledge and skills necessary to understand and effectively engage in our democracy. Unfortunately, civics education is no longer consistently being taught in classrooms across the United States. This is leading to a less informed and less engaged electorate. So this evening's Timely Topics program highlights the growing recognition of the need to strengthen civic education in North Carolina and really throughout the United States. And to address this issue, we are very excited to have three experts in the field with us tonight. Amy Farrell is the executive director with Generation Nation, an agency working to develop the new generation of civic leaders. Amy lends her talents as an innovative leader and a social entrepreneur who, among other things, is experienced in nonprofit leadership, program development, K-12 education, civic literacy, public affairs, and business management. She is a connector who effectively builds, leverages, and supports relationships among organizations, people, and ideas. Sara Basinger has been a member of the League of Women Voters North Carolina State Board since 2023, and she is an active participant with voter services, the education, and the Civics 101 action teams at her local league in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Sara's passion for educational issues stems from having grown up in a family with 3 generations of teachers. In her professional life, Sara has served as an editor, a writer, project director, and small business owner. The last of which, and I just am so interested in this, of which was she was a co-owner of MySat Play LLC in New York, a community of women who challenge themselves to step out of their comfort zones to play and dare through various activities, classes, and readings. She has 2 grown sons and lives in Charlotte with her husband and their sweet dog, Lucy. Sara Michaels is an elections and legislative reporter for Carolina Public Press, a statewide digital news outlet focused on covering the stories and the angles others aren't. She recently reported a 3-part series called Civics Unlearned that explores how conflicting priorities and inconsistent instruction have led to the neglect of civic education in schools, which in turn has contributed to a disengaged North Carolina electorate. I highly recommend these articles. I think they are excellent. And before finding a home in Raleigh, in the Raleigh State House, Michaels worked as a political reporter in her Kentucky hometown. So to get things started, Sara Michaels will now discuss her articles and set the stage for the need for civics education in North Carolina.
Great. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you all can see that. Are you all able to see that?
It's
No,
not
I
coming
don't think
through.
you have to exit the full screen because we're not seeing the image.
Okay,
There you go.
There it is.
Yeah.
right there is good. Okay, great. Well, thank you for the introduction, Kathy. I appreciate it. Yeah, so civics is, like you said, is kind of at the heart of everything, civics education. As I've covered elections for a year and a half now, it always comes back to that. And so it's a very interesting topic, and I'm glad you guys are looking into it. So we're going to start with a little bit of an exercise. There's this survey they did in 2024 that looked at all of the states in the nation on various indicators of civic health. You know, it's not just voting that matters when it comes to civic engagement. There's other things. And North Carolina was ranked on it. So I want you to think in your head of if you would say that you did this and then compare yourself to some of the other people in North Carolina and across the nation. So the first indicator is Do you discuss political, social, or local issues with friends and family frequently? And North Carolina is 34th in the nation on this, which is below average, with about a third of the people doing this, saying they do this. The next question is similar, but it's with neighbors, not just your friends and family. North Carolina is 31st with that. Then we have buying or boycotting a product or service, presumably like for political or social reasons. We are 36th in the nation in that. We don't do that as often, but nationally, it's not as common either. Then you have donated to a political organization in an amount over $25. Very few North Carolinians tend to do this. We're 42nd in the nation. Then you have consumed news about political, societal, or local issues frequently. And this hurts my heart because we're 45th in the nation for that. And I would love if people would read my articles, but it's okay. Then we have posting on social media or the internet frequently. That's 46th, first, yeah, in the nation. Then we have participated in public meetings. This could be a city council meeting, a board of education meeting, anything like that, where you're involved in the community. And we're 47th in the nation on that. Again, like 6% of North Carolinians do this or have done this. Contacted a public official. We're 50th in the nation on this, so we're really not associating with our representatives. And then we have some of the things you might more typically associate with civic engagement. Registering to vote. This was the 2022 midterm, so think about the last election. Did you register to vote? We're 51st in the nation because DC is included in this analysis. And the last one is how many people actually voted in the 2022 election. According to this analysis, 45% of North Carolinians did. There are some data discrepancies, but either way, we're still below average in the nation. This analysis says we're 45th in the nation. So you can see there's an issue there. We're compared to the rest of the nation, we're not very civically engaged, and the nation as a whole isn't necessarily that civically engaged either. So it's not like we're comparing ourselves to a gold standard either. So what is the issue here? I want to start by looking a little deeper into the data from this survey. They broke it down a little bit on various lines, and we can kind of see where there's differences and where there aren't. So there's, first of all, a gender difference. And to not make you have to read all the numbers, there's really not much of a difference between women and men on this. It's kind of similar. Then you have age, and they combine it into the various brackets. So under 30, over 30. And there is quite a big difference here. The over 30 crowd, maybe predictably, has higher engagement on everything except for posting on social media. And they're kind of similar on the discussing issues among friends and family and neighbors. And part of this makes sense because when you're 16, you're not filing your taxes. You don't have time to go to a public meeting. But it is such a broad range that this such a significant difference does give me a little pause and make me wonder what's going on with the younger North Carolinians. Then you have the educational breakdown, and generally the more highly educated North Carolinians are going to be more engaged. There's a few exceptions. Let me see what those were. Posting on social media and discussing issues with your friends, family, and neighbors doesn't really seem to matter as much. There's still a little bit of a difference there. So now we're seeing the age matters, education matters. Then we have a few things that broke down on family income level, and those that they chose, there was a pretty big difference. When you had come from a wealthier family, you participate in more public meetings, probably because you have more time to, and do some of these things. Then we have along race, they just divided between white North Carolinians and Black North Carolinians. And white North Carolinians were higher on every single indicator except for participating in public meetings. Then we have finally geography, urban, suburban, rural. This was a little bit of a mixed bag, but the areas where urban voters were higher is on voting, going to public meetings, consuming the news. Suburban was highest on registering to vote, contacting public officials, and rural people were higher among discussing things with their friends, families, and neighbors, and social media posting. So the reason I went through all of that is to show you that there's a variety of things that can impact whether somebody is a civically engaged person or not. It's not just one thing, which makes it such a hard topic to cover and to fix. When I was doing my reporting on this project, something that came up over and over again was family upbringing. It's as simple as if your parents vote and they talk about voting with you, you're more likely to vote when you're older, and vice versa. Like that's so important. And transplant culture in North Carolina, we have so many new people that come here, and I'm also a transplant. And when you come here, you're just not as rooted in the community. You might not know what's going on in the city council, and that might not be your first priority to figure out. So it might take a little bit longer. Political landscape. We are a purple state, which would make me think at first that we'd be more civically engaged because your voice has more of a chance to make an impact. But if you looked deeper into it, it's not necessarily that way, because the purple that is North Carolina is divided into really, really bright blue and really, really bright red little pockets. So in these little pockets, you might not have much of a voice because this is all redistricting, gerrymandering, where if you live, in Wake County where I live and you're a Republican, then you're not gonna be able to make much of an impact. So you might feel like less inclined to participate. There's also social media and distractions. That's a lot of the younger people I talked to for this story talked about how, there's a lot going on, and politics and voting is kind of boring comparatively to all the other things that they have going on in their life. There's the economy in the workplace. We live in a very productive, focused culture, and sometimes there's not time to go to a public meeting or something like that. And then finally, education, which is what I focused on for this series. And why did I focus on education out of all those factors? I think it's because education could be the great equalizer. All of those things, like no matter what difference you have, whether you live in a different area, whether you're white or black or a different race, or if your family is wealthy or your parents voted or didn't, everybody ends up in school. And so theoretically, that could be a place where if you educate people correctly on civic education, they could all come out on a relatively more equal playing field and become engaged citizens. But that's not really happening, as you can see from the statistics that I showed you. So I kind of wanted to look into why that was. So here's my bit of a thesis statement, which I believe Kathy kind of went into a little bit, but I'll repeat it. So what I found was that in recent decades, civic education has been left behind in favor of other priorities. And what's left has been watered down by this political environment that we live in right now. And all of that has contributed to a disengaged North Carolina. And there is hope, though, because there are solutions. And if we strategically invest in the right ways to overhaul the education system, then we can get back on track in time. And the way my definition of civic education for this was civic education teaches students how their government works and their place in it. That's very important. And if done correctly, arms them with the knowledge, the confidence, and the motivation to participate in their local communities, and demonstrates the influence they can have in governmental decision making. So let's get into the meat of my series. So I looked into the problem first. Like, why is the education system not seeming to produce like civically engaged adults? I found from talking to educators and people like that it was kind of a wild west, as somebody told me, in the civics world. You might have a really good civics teacher and you might have a mediocre teacher, and it all depends on their passion and their willingness to go the extra mile, because the standards are vague and you can kind of do whatever you want with them. This screenshot over here is from this grade that the North Carolina Standards got from the Fordham Institute, which is a conservative institute, but they're like a think tank. And they said North Carolina's standards were just really vague and they didn't know what to do with them. Like, here's some examples. There's a second grade standard that says teachers are supposed to teach students this: how to exemplify ways individuals and groups shape communities and contribute to the making of rules and laws. You could kind of do a lot with that. It's not very specific. Not every student across North Carolina is going to be taught the same thing at all with that. And yeah, so that's one of the problems. Another problem is even when you're teaching civics, sometimes you're teaching the wrong things. I talked to a Duke professor, Dr. Sunshine Hilligus, and she's looked into this a lot. And she found that there's not really a big correlation between civic education and voter turnout. And I was like, well, that's crazy. But she was like, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The problem is that civic education isn't focusing on the right things. It's focusing on like what date was World War II and what are the three branches of government, and not on how do I actually register to vote and what are the practical differences between the modern two parties, the Democrats and Republicans. Like, how can I actually live in this political world and know how to participate? So why is all of this a problem? I'm sure you could come up with your own reasons, but the obvious answer is if there's fewer people participating, there's fewer people making decisions that impact everybody, and that's going to be generally the more people, more extreme people who are participating if the fewer people are participating. And nobody really likes the more extreme political decisions at the end of the day, except for those people. So it's not good for really anybody. And then younger people are less represented, in particular if you have a situation in North Carolina where the under 30 crowd is much less engaged. And that, I mean, that has practical policy impacts. Social Security is the third rail of politics for a reason. That's what Dr. Hilligus told me, and not education policy, because that's older people generally are the ones who are more engaged, and they're the ones who are forcing their representatives to act on certain things. There's lack of media literacy skills. That's a big part of civic education that's effective. And I'm not sure that students are really getting that in any other subject in school on a consistent basis. And then the most, and maybe not the most important, but the most impactful I see in my life is the lack of ability to work together across differences to solve problems. Politics and community decision making is all about compromise. And if students don't learn how to do that, or the history of doing that in their civics classes, then they're not going to be able to use that in their real life to solve problems. Okay, and then the second problem was standardized testing. I'm sure you've all heard of the No Child Left Behind Act from 2001, which I'm sure had great intentions, but had a lot of interesting side effects. And one of the side effects hurt civics education. So the No Child Left Behind Act prioritized standardized testing, specifically in math and science and reading. And at that one point, there might have been social studies testing, but it was kind of a voluntary situation. And the tested subjects became a priority because your like federal funding was contingent on your students doing well in those subjects. So social studies and civics were put on the back burner because your teacher isn't going to get fired. You're still going to get money if you're not doing as well in that subject. You really got to focus on the other ones. And a lot of times what happened, teachers told me, was that social studies kind of got lumped into reading. Like you would read a historical passage and be like, that's social studies. And that's really not teaching you the same things that you need to be learning in civics and social studies in general. And that turned into the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is a little bit looser, but there's still some issues. And then there's the spoken mirrors testing. Even when there was testing in social studies or civics, it was about those, facts and figures and not really the practical things that determine whether you're actually civically engaged. And then we have related STEM. It became popular around the same time as the standardized testing. The United States wanted to compete on a global level with other countries, and we thought that investing in science, technology, energy, or engineering, mathematics would be the way to do that, and that civics is not included in that. And there's not really this return on investment on civics in the eyes of the people who or behind STEM. Like, it does create a better democracy, but is that going to help your business? Is that going to help your economy? Maybe not. They didn't really see it that way. But the original reason to even have public education was so that this community of people, like the whole idea of a democracy is being ruled by the people. So the whole idea of public education in the beginning was to give people enough knowledge on how their government worked so that they could effectively rule themselves. And we've gotten pretty far away from that. And Amy is here, but I really liked this quote from her where she said, "What we hear a lot from students is that they just don't hear from adults that this is important." And you can see that in the numbers. According to a 2020 study, the federal government invested 5 cents per K through 12 student per civic education compared to $54 for STEM. So that's exponentially greater investment. And then the final problem that has led to this, deterioration of civic education is the politicization of the subject. I'm sure you've all seen the headlines of teachers getting in trouble for teaching certain things that parents don't necessarily agree with. They feel like they're being indoctrinated. And this kind of happened to Lindsay Noble, who was a teacher in the state, or she still is, but she taught civics for 2 decades, I believe, and she always loved it. Loved teaching her students, how government impacted their daily lives. But around the pandemic era, she was trying to teach like a hybrid group of students. There was some students in the class and some students on Zoom, and she was trying to teach them about the influence of polls, and somehow the story about from NPR related to this. And the story from NPR was about the Black Lives Matter movement, and it included a statement on like the rhetoric of President Donald Trump on this movement. And she was just playing this podcast for her students, and they were going to discuss it afterwards. And in the middle of this, a parent popped into the Zoom and started yelling at Mrs. Noble, and accused her of indoctrinating her students. And for Noble, this was not the first time where she had had something like this happen, but this was, a new level. And so after that, she decided that she was done teaching civics. And that example is pretty extreme, but on a more minor level, that's happening to a lot of educators across the state, where they're receiving negative feedback about the way they're teaching if they're including, current events to try to engage their students in this social studies civics learning. And instead of, fighting this because nobody wants to lose their job, they're kind of censoring themselves and maybe going to a more boring and more standard civics education of like, here's 3 branches of government and that's it. We don't need to compare it to the real life branches of government so you can understand better how it impacts your daily life, because then I might get in trouble. And then the legislature hasn't exactly helped with this. They passed the Parents' Bill of Rights in 2023, and that, I don't think intentionally, but there's a provision of that bans or requires parents to approve surveys that deal with or would ask kids about their political leanings. And that effectively ended this program in Henderson County, where there was like K through 12 voting every election cycle. And it was voting on, fairly innocuous things for the most part, and it didn't count. But it was kind of instilling this habit of voting in students. And that was kind of counted as a survey. And so they can't do it anymore. So that's just one example of legislature having a negative impact on civics education. And the bigger impact is that there used to be this pre-registration law where 16 and 17-year-olds could pre-register to vote. It's back, but the original law was repealed at one point and brought back by the courts later. But when it was brought back, a part of that law was missing. And the part of that law was missing was there used to be, when you pre-registered to vote, these 16 and 17-year-olds, there was an education component. County boards of education or some other group had to come in the classroom and explain, hey, like, here's how to register to vote. Here's this form. Like, here's how you handle it. And now we're missing that education component. So while 16 and 17-year-olds may be able to pre-register, they don't really like understand how or why. And that's really important aspect of it if you want people to actually pre-register to vote. So finally, the solutions. What can we do to fix it? I mentioned the elections already. If we could somehow, they're trying to figure out how to bring it back in some way. I'm not sure how that's going. But as I also mentioned, the pre-registration requirement, if you could bring it back, the education component, that's super important. And actually, Dr. Hilligus, who I mentioned before, has found in her research that the most effective way to increase turnout among these younger voters is to have pre-registration, which we have, although maybe only half the counties are actually, or school districts are actually doing it, combined with education. And that's the most effective way to actually get kids to be engaged later. We also have this thing called action civics and project-based learning. There's a few states that have done this. There's one that's Tennessee, and they had this law that passed a while ago that requires one time in middle school and one time in high school, you have to have this project-based civics learning thing. So what that means is that students get together and they say, okay, like what's a problem in our school or in our local community? Like maybe they're seeing a lot of trash or pollution outside their community. They can work together and be like, how do we solve this problem? Let's come up with a proposal. And who do we go to? Like, does the city handle this? Does the state handle this? Let's figure out who we talk to about this. And it's essentially a way to try to actually teach students how you work together to make change. And it's civics in action that's not just learning about it in a textbook. And We the People curriculum is a good example of that. You guys can look that up later. And also North Carolina does only has a high school civics course. And if we had a middle school course, that would be better, if we had both, because you want to get people younger. So civics matters even before you can vote. It matters because it's about connecting and working with people in your community to solve problems, which you don't need to vote to do. And then finally, professional development. Teachers are dealing with this politicization of their classroom and they need resources and support on how to handle this in an unbiased, nonpartisan way, but also to not just completely like censor themselves and hurt their students in the process. And I think that's all I have. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And let me try to.
We'll take questions at the end,
Okay, great.
after all the speakers have gone. Kathy, you're muted. Kathy, you're muted.
Sorry. Or you could put them in the chat, and then we'll take the questions or comments from the chat at the end of the program. And I have to say, I mean, I can't thank Sara enough. As a retired public school employee myself, I can vouch for almost everything she just said. And it's interesting. So thank you so much. Okay, so up next is Amy Farrell, and she's going to discuss how Generation Nation and North Carolina Civics Coalition are advancing civics education and leadership in North Carolina. And she's going to outline potential opportunities for partnership with the League of Women Voters.
Yeah, thank you. Let me pull up my slides, and I feel like my name should be Sara to fit in with the other two Sara speakers. So tonight I'll change my name. But I'm really excited to be here. It was really great to just hear Sara give that great overview about civic health and the state of civic education. One thing I can share is that it's not approved yet, but in the strategic plan for North Carolina schools, there might be an action civics type project component ahead. So we'll see. Hopefully there's some hope on that. And hopefully I'll give you some hope too, telling you about kind of the stuff that we do with Generation Nation and a project that we created called the North Carolina Civics Coalition. We're working together with schools and local governments and organizations. We've worked for a long time with the League of Women Voters and other folks to help students like these wonderful students to do all the things that Sara mentioned. I mean, learn about the voting process, learn about their government, learn about the community, different ways to be involved and take it. So it's not just the three branches of government or what happened in 1776 or the ways that things can get kind of boring. Let's see if I can, sorry, got computer's starting to get slow, so I apologize. What our young people that we work with? We work in Charlotte and in other places in North Carolina, and really what we're hoping to do is to educate students about all aspects of civic life and to get them plugged into it. And just first, for a little bit of history, our organization was actually started in the 90s, early 90s, by newspapers and civic leaders in Charlotte and Raleigh and Greensboro and other parts of the state. And we were called Kids Voting. And that was a mock election event that would happen every year or every 4 years, depending on the community. And different towns and communities kind of took that on in their own way, and it sort of has fizzled out in some of those areas. But for the work we've done in Charlotte, the civic health that Sara talked about, that's a report that happens about every 4 years. And so when that happened around 2010, we were involved in that and started talking with schools and just lots of stakeholders and looking at civic health and thinking, well, gosh, we want to educate students about voting and so much more. We want to make sure that they know that being an active citizen and knowing all this stuff you've got to do it every day. It's not just one day every year, or if you're lucky, or for most people every day, 4 years. And so we worked to kind of expand our programming, change our name to Generation Nation, but just wanted to reflect kind of this long history. There has been work in North Carolina to do a lot of civic education programming in different ways. And things change, just like technology has changed and other things have changed. And so this work has changed as well. And a few of the things that we do, I'll kind of just briefly mention. We work with teachers to help them to find if they're teaching about like a local government, to help them know how to find information about their local government or the mayor or a county budget or the state legislature, just to make civics come real for them. And then really, and like Sara said, and also to help them feel comfortable teaching it and not like they're going to get fired. And that gets harder and harder. But really a lot of our work is this hands-on civic learning for students. We do mock elections. So tell the folks I don't know if you said it was Henderson County or Hendersonville, but we'd be happy to help. You can help any community do that. We still do that, where students vote to make their voices heard on local elections, state elections, federal elections. In Charlotte, Mecklenburg, we do sort of an extra piece of that, where students, we partner with the Board of Education, and the students at Charlotte Mecklenburg schools vote to elect a student who serves on the school board with the board. And so when the school board is talking about changing the budget or doing whatever, they've got an actual student who they can talk to and get feedback, and it gives students across the district real vote. It's not like the mock elections are great, but it's not real, so that makes it real. And these are things I'm going to mention that any community can do, and I'd be happy to talk after this about how to do this and how the league can be involved and kind of expand some of these ideas in other places. We help partner with the Board of Elections to have students can work in polls when they are 16 and 17 and on up. And so that's a real great way for them to see elections and learn about it. Pre-registration, work on that, work with the league on registration efforts. We help teachers and youth with like a Civics 101, so they understand all the different components of government and get to see it in action. So there's just a lot of ways, and I can kind of go on and on, but there's just a lot of ways in every community has these same sort of thing, like a county government, a town government, there's elections. And so it really is replicable in other places. And a lot of it takes place outside of the school day because of as Sara mentioned, there's so many challenges with schools, and honestly, a lot of teachers are just trying to get through the day. And so we really, all of us collectively, it's important we want them to to teach and to be supported and to do more, but we also don't want to add too much more to their plate. We want students to learn this at the end of the day. So really, I mean, like all of our programs really just immerse students in voting, talking about issues, meeting with elected officials, meeting with people who work in government to see that there's jobs that they might do, that it's not all political stuff or that you have to be the mayor to make a difference. And there's lots of ways that students can be involved and youth can be involved. And even serving on boards. I have high school students that are my boss. They serve on the Generation Nation board. And so that helps them to learn about the process and about volunteering. And I mean, honestly, what a lot of the students like learning about all this stuff is not just the official civics part, but also they get very excited about like when they see an agenda or leading a meeting, like stuff that we've learned and take for granted. So there's a lot of pieces that the students take out of civic learning that go beyond being able to make democracy happen and being part of the electorate. So it's neat to see that. This is kind of like the outcomes that we hope that students will achieve are in building civic literacy, becoming civic leaders. They learn how their governments and communities work, and they know that firsthand through that action civics piece, like Sara mentioned. They understand and can play, they have an opportunity to play a role in school and civic decision making. They're able to find and use good sources of civic information, and that's from news to how to find, I don't know, information on the city's website or their county's website or what the General Assembly is doing. And build all the knowledge and experience and skills in the networks to be active now and into the future, as active in their communities and active as leaders and voting and all the pieces of civic life. And I think it's important to sort of think about kind of in addition, you know, we want people to vote, we want people to, all the pieces of civic health that Sara mentioned, but it also helps the students individually. And so I think that's important to lift up too, especially as we're talking about civic education. And a lot of people really don't know what it is. And they just think it's politics or trying to get people to vote in somebody or vote out somebody. And it's really just such a large breadth of things, the knowledge and the skills and the experience, and then also being able to talk to people and meet people and think of jobs that they never knew even existed. So there's just a ton of things involved in civic learning that we really want people to know about. One of our projects that we started a couple of years ago is the North Carolina Civics Coalition. And it is a group, right now we have 21 members, and it's a variety of different, there's government agencies, there's higher education institutions, there's nonprofits, we have educators involved, youth, we have a youth advisory committee, public officials are involved from local and state level. And it's an opportunity to do a couple of things. One, to see what's happening across the state with civic education, where are there good programs, what's not happening, what's missing, and sort of work together to plug those gaps. And also give these organizations a chance to collaborate. The League of Women Voters North Carolina is involved, a variety of folks. And it's just like we had a meeting of these groups this morning, and it was great. Some of the groups are planning summer professional development opportunities for teachers. And so everybody's working in their own bubbles. And so they're getting a chance to say, well, we're doing this for middle school, or we're doing this for Eastern North Carolina, or we're planning this. And so just helping these groups work together. And then we're also still in fairly early stages, but helping to do a couple of other things. One is to compile the different resources and opportunities and be able to make them accessible and share them out and have like a hub on the internet, and encourage the League, your programs and your resources. We'd love to put that on the North Carolina Civics Coalition website or social media and things. And so if you're a teacher or a student in whatever county, because I mean, in Wake County, there's a lot of civics opportunities for youth. There are a few in Charlotte, but in a lot of counties, there's nothing really. There might be a youth council, there might be scouts. And so being able to find out, oh, I can go to the North Carolina Youth Legislative Assembly, or I can be a page, or I can do this or that, or a teacher can find training at Carolina K-12 or something. That's something we're trying to do. And then the other thing that we're really trying to do, and would really love your help in doing this, is number one, lifting up just a civic, well, what is civic education? Because we're all in this world, but a lot of people aren't. And so sometimes it takes a lot of explaining to tell people kind of what it is, but why it's important and why they should care. And that's both the public and also elected officials, from school boards to local government to our legislators, and helping them to know about it, understand it, and eventually we hope to drive some policy and investment to support civic education. One thing that we learned last year is that our state government, or the school district, budgets $0 for civic education compared to a lot of stuff. And so that was very eye-opening. And so we'd like to see that change. Hasn't yet, but hopefully it will. One thing that's kind of exciting is that with our higher education partners, that there's 2 programs at UNC Chapel Hill and one at State. They didn't work together, working together now, but they were able to write federal grants. And so they got collectively about $3 million of federal funding that's going to pay for teacher training this summer on civics education. And so that's huge for this state. So we're really excited about that. And let's see, sorry. Trying to touch screen and a screen that doesn't have that. Just wanted to lift up, Sara mentioned the Civic Health Index, and I've got a link I can put in the chat after I stop talking. It's just got a lot of information. I was actually one of the authors for it with some of the others. And so all these great statistics that Sara mentioned, there's also some stories about other groups that are doing things, and also some recommendations. And so if that's up your alley, that might be something you'd be interested in doing. Was last summer, we had a Civic Health Summit, and planning to do another one this summer. We can make sure you all get information about. So if you want to talk with people from across the state about these topics, civic education, and how do we increase voter registration and turnout and get more people to go to public meetings, and all the great things that you saw the stats about, there's a group working on it. So that's there. And then I want to also, there's a group called Civics Now, and it is we're the state organization that coordinates civic education groups, and they're the national organization that coordinates civic education groups, and they foster collaboration, but they're a great resource for policy and to see what other states are doing. And so, and I can put their website in the chat too. They're constantly talking to Congress to advocate for civics funding and all sorts of stuff, and helping us to talk with our state legislators, and talking with, there's a national test called, I forget what it's an acronym, NAEP, and they test for, they have scores for science and math and civics, and they test like every 4 years, and you can see how 8th graders' knowledge is increasing. So they've been able to advocate on that test. We don't love tests, but it also helps us to know kind of how our progress is. In the next few years, there'll be not only an 8th grade civics test, which is hard for North Carolina since our 8th graders haven't learned civics yet, but there'll be an 8th grade test and a 12th grade test. So that'll be good. And we'll have some state level data. And so that's something that this Civics Now group is working on. And kind of to wrap it up, I wanted to just talk about some way. I mean, I would love this to be sort of an introduction. And, after we've talked tonight, all 3 of us, about civic education, there may be some things that I've mentioned or the others, and we would love to just figure out if this is something you're interested in. We can help, bring a program to you or share your resources. A couple of things that I did want to lift up. I think the very biggest number one thing is just to help raise awareness that this is important. People don't think about it very often, and a lot of people think civics is happening, and we know that it's not. And the urgency. We can see that lack of civic knowledge is really becoming much more evident. We've really appreciated the work that the League does, especially it's not just kids. We work with kids all the time. You all are working with adults and helping these kids' moms and dads and aunts and uncles and neighbors to be registered and to understand their communities. And that's super important. So really would encourage you to continue to do that, and helping to support some of these youth organizations that do engage youth in civic life. We can help connect you to some of them. And then also really look at, there's teaching in school, but then kids are out of school a lot of their day and all summer. And so there's opportunities to partner with groups that serve students in those capacities. That's, I think, where there's a lot of opportunity for civic learning. And let us know how to share your stuff on the North Carolina Civics Coalition website. And I'll kind of close it out. Here's my contact information and social media and that sort of thing. We had sort of a call to action that youth came up with, and I can let you read that on the screen. But youth are really, not every youth, of course, just like not every adult, but they want to do this stuff, and they want opportunities, and they want each other to care. And then they really want adults to care more, and can do that by investing more in civic education. And that includes making sure there's more time in the classroom for it, there's more money for it, finding more ways to include youth in decision making. So it's not just, seeing old people from, a youth perspective being in these roles, giving youth a chance. Some communities involve youth in like budget development, or finding lots of different ways to help them, decide the name of a park, or what, what a recycling program might be. And then really working, what we've seen, and I hate to kind of end on this because this could be a whole nother hour of discussion, but there are real significant opportunity gaps for civic learning. And I think Sara alluded to that, like your family involvement is part of it. Not every young person has grown up in a family where they see people, my timer, voting, and not everybody lives in a community that has access to lots of different opportunities. And so the more that we can kind of collaborate and make sure that all youth have these opportunities, and all these decision makers know that this is just as important as STEM and arts education and all the other stuff, then we'll solve all those problems that Sara kicked us off with. So that's a little bit, hopefully gives you some hope that there's work happening, can be done really in any community. And the first step is really hopefully easy. It's just telling people we need more civics. So I really appreciate you having me here, and can't wait to hear our next speaker.
Thank you, Amy. I thought that was incredibly informative, encouraging, and motivating. Now we are going to hear from Sara Basinger, and she's going to discuss the League of Women Voters North Carolina's civic education work.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Kathy, and thanks to Wake League for the invitation. I send regrets from Reagan A. Duddle, who is my fellow board member on the North Carolina State Board. And she's very active. She knows Amy well and appreciates everything you do in the community, Amy, across the state. And hopes to build, like you're saying, we love the partnership and what NC Civics is doing, and hope to help carry all that forward. And I was so inspired by both of your talks. Thank you so much. And even in the not so great news, I see those things as opportunities. Um, so I might retread a little about what Sandra kicked us off at the beginning of the meeting, just to level set again what the league does in the civic, for civic engagement, um, and what we hope to achieve. So as Sandra said, our core to our mission, where a core focus is our nonpartisanship, and so that we help people learn how to participate in government and public affairs in that nonpartisan way and in public oriented ways. And we focus on education, participation, and civic engagement rather than supporting any party or candidate. And then our structure allows us to use, we're very much, we rely on a lot of resources from national and state, but it's truly the local leagues that can have that connection with communities and build, both through voter registration efforts, through civics programming, and really push us forward. So at the national level, the big thing, of course, is our Vote for One, our voter guide. And now with the primaries open, we're referring to people to it every chance we get. And that of course is a flagship for us, and we really encourage all leagues to push that particularly at election season when it's populated with candidate responses. Then statewide, we try to provide voter, toolkits for get out the vote, and civic resources for leagues to remind their communities that that elections are happening. And then but back to at the national level, they've announced a partnership with Superintendents Association across the country. And we're really eager to hear what that toolkit looks like, recognizing that, and hoping that it's useful across the country, but also recognizing that each state is different, each community is different, and the access we're given into our schools and to our students and young people, it looks different across different communities. So we're hoping that toolkit is applicable to all of us. But like I said, we're as a state league, we're gonna be providing toolkits again for Get Out the Vote, and those will include a lot of resources for civic education for communities. So the league's been engaging in schools and communities and developing relationships and programs to support civic involvement and outreach. Like many of our local leagues collaborate with other organizations and or have their own programs and host outreach events. That Henderson program that was mentioned, the mock election, that's been something that they've joyfully provided over the years, and it's a shame to see, communities pull back on allowing that kind of education to take place. Because as I think it was you that was saying this, Amy, or maybe it was Sarah, that it was something completely innocuous that it was being voted on. I think it was which animal should, of a stuffed group of stuffed animals, which animal should win the election, which, just goes to show like the adults are getting in the way of the adults' feelings about politics are getting in the way of the kids' education, which um, we we hope we can push back against. So we anyway, we try at all levels, national, state, and local, to introduce residents to civics processes and encourage people to take part at whatever level they, whether it's voting, but democracy is not just about election day. So we love to encourage folks to get under the hood of their local government, state government, national, and just really see, like, as Sarah was talking through, who in your community do you call if there's a street light out on your corner? Who do you complain to about, if there's a water main situation, it's good for citizens to be able to be armed with the information so that they can engage with their community and have their needs met. So, but back again to that changing landscape, those partnerships that we've traditionally had with schools and colleges and hosting voter registration drives and student civic outreach. And we hosted, we used to host the Let's Talk Civics presentations. And these are all like vital forums for learning about county, city, state government. Those are, there's definitely some pushback in, and as has been discussed, some of that is that teacher, things like the Parents' Bill of Rights and our state legislature not, funding civics in specific, and rollback of DEI. I mean, there are lots of reasons that we can point to that that put civics education in jeopardy. But we try to approach it with we need to be nimble, and we all know how important it is. And so we need to be nimble and creative to continue to push for more civics education. So, that our inability for our traditional programs to be hosted, it, doesn't mean we should stop trying. So we're working with existing partnerships, and Reagan, I know, sits on the NC Civics board with Amy, and we are trying to build even more partnerships and reach students if it can't be in schools. And don't get me wrong, there are some communities around North Carolina that are still allowing voter registration and education in schools, but we're hearing of more and more schools that are not. And so for those communities, we're trying to reach students through clubs, youth groups. We're engaging some with Girl Scouts to do, civic education, like, a couple times a year for younger kids. And then and students are very interested, but don't always see the current system is working. So we're hosting programs where students can discuss issues and advocate by letters or attending meetings, and kind of teaching them a little bit how to present at a meeting, how to do public comment. So it's real-time civics that may help students participate in democracy. Um, so we're, and that speaks to, just us having to adapt. And when we work with students, I think, Amy, you were talking about this, that teaching students, even when you're teaching or helping the students lead a voter registration drive, for example, it's like working with them to understand how the forms need to be completed properly, so that it encourages that to continue to be something that can be done. Because a lot of times, maybe a county pulls back because half of the registration forms that come from a student drive come back incomplete, and it's a lot of work on the board of elections to go back and make sure that those are that they have the information they need to properly register the students. So they need to, because they need to follow up and then teaching students that just handing in a form isn't the end of the story. They need to go back and check their registration, check that they were registered, and take responsibility for their part in the process. And then we try to provide materials that give clear guidance on what students need to be able to vote. Do they need to bring their photo ID? They need, so that we're just excited to partner with and continue to build programming that kind of pivots in this time where the traditional ways are not being, we're being blocked. So we're just, some ideas are exploring with Reagan and the board are to develop a student toolkit for leagues to use. And again, trying to put it in terms where it's applicable across the state, but then of course each league needs to adapt to their own community's environment and how they're being received in schools or clubs or the like. So and then Reagan's working hard to get to speak to all the local leagues to share their programs with NC Civics, and allowing other groups to benefit from what we've built. I know, there was that program in Henderson with the mock elections. I know Wake has created some really wonderful videos of state or a national, state, and local government. I know Charlotte Mecklenburg has a really robust Civics 101 program that is live, where participants go to the government center here and have 7 sessions on, city, county, judges, school board of elections, and then the final one is now they have a statewide, about state government, and then the final one is news media that covers government, local news media. So we want to just keep sharing resources and then trying to build on what we have in the environment we're in. And with that, I'll just say, this is contact information for Reagan and myself, and we'd love to talk to anybody who has questions or advice or, resources to share. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I thought you offered really, really great ideas and suggestions. And I love your nimble approach to things because I think that is key now. Flexibility is key. So thanks to all of our panelists for your work and what you are doing to highlight the importance of civic education and for really sharing your insights on this important topic with us this evening. And just a reminder to everybody that might be interested in brushing up on your own civics knowledge, take a look at our civics resources on our League of Women Voters Wake County homepage because we've curated quite a few, and I think some of them are really worth looking at. We are now going to stop the recording of this presentation, and we're going to have just a very brief question and answer session. So I've already seen some really good questions in the chat, but if you have any questions for any of our panelists or just a comment in general, go ahead and put it in the chat, and Sandra Burkhead's going to take it from here, and she's going to monitor those questions.